that we are conducting this meeting by electronic means as permitted by the open meeting law because of extraordinary circumstances. This meeting will be conducted by WebEx and will be recorded. Members of the public will be able to monitor this meeting either by calling the number and the passcode listed on the posted agenda, which can be found on the Met Council website, or by clicking the link on the agenda to view the live stream of the meeting. I do want to remind committee members of the use of the chat function, and please only use the function to address technical difficulties, like if you can't hear. We'll communicate with each other only through speaking. This ensures that even people listening in to the recording can hear all the comments that are shared during the meeting. So if there are no questions there, I will move through the agenda. Seeing no questions. On the agenda, the first is the approval of the minutes, and I would entertain a motion for approval, please.
Vento moves approval of the minutes.
Second, Lindstrom.
Thank you, council members. Any additions, corrections, changes, discussion? Seeing none, Michelle, please call the roll.
Yes, Chair Lilligren. Atlas Ingebrigtsen.
Aye. Or here.
Chambliss.
Here.
Cummings.
Here.
Johnson. Lee.
Here.
Lindstrom.
Are we approving the minutes? Is that that's what we're doing?
Yes.
We are. I'm taking it here as an affirmative vote.
And I'm still here.
Do you need us to redo that? I'm sorry, I was confused too, but
no, I'm so nice to see everyone. I'm interpreting it here as an affirmative vote. So
okay, I'm going to continue with the roll call for the minutes.
Thank you, Michelle.
And we are up to Mousse.
Yes.
Vento.
Aye.
Wolf.
aye.
And Lilligren.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. That motion is adopted and the minutes are approved.
Chair Lilligren.
Yes.
I think there might have been just confusion about the roll call. Michelle has already taken the roll for who's attending, correct?
We did not take a roll for who's attending, so the first vote can count as an attendance vote. Yeah.
That is correct,
So,
Chair. Thank you.
Yep. Right. So, and we also don't need to take a vote on the agenda. So if there's any concerns about it, but if you like, we can go through the roll call again on the motion to approve the minutes. Folks have a feeling about that?
I would prefer not to waste the time.
Thank you.
Mr.
Okay.
Chair, it's Judy.
Yep.
I'm sorry I'm a couple minutes late. I'm yes on the minutes as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming. So we will, thanks for being here. Let's move along on the agenda to the business items. The first business item is 2020-183. It's a joint committees item, the City of Apple Valley 2040 Comprehensive Plan and Comprehensive Sewer Plan. Mr. Boylan is here to present. Welcome, Mr. Boylan.
Thank you, Chair Lilligren. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Active Representative for Districts 13, 14, 15, and 16 in the Local Planning Assistance Group and Community Development Division. And I'd like the committee to know that Mr. Bruce Erdquist is the Community Development Director, City Planner, both and before you is the review of the City of Apple Valley's 2040 plan. Next slide, please. Okay, the figure 2 from the staff report is a suburban community and thrive.
Mr. Chair, the audio for Patrick is going
I see
in and out.
2040.
Thank you. That everyone's
Is it doing it for everybody or just?
Yes, it is. Thanks, council member. Yeah, Patrick, your audio is kind of fading in and out, and it's a little crackly. So we're missing about every fourth word or something. Field-
speak
It's actually a little worse now.
into the corner. I think is the microphone.
Yeah, it's deteriorating even more now, Patrick.
Sound better?
Now we can't hear you at all. Nothing. Patrick, we're not hearing you at all. Patrick?
Chair Lilligren,
Yeah.
perhaps we can, this is Lisa Barajas, Community Development
Yeah.
Director.
How about now?
Perhaps we can just switch the order of the
How about-
agenda so Patrick can work on his audio. Would that be amenable? Sorry, I know staff don't switch the order, but perhaps that might be helpful.
You know, I'm fine to do that. Patrick, did you do something technical? All of a sudden we were hearing you a little better. Do you want to just talk, Patrick? So we're not hearing you now, Patrick. So if there is no objection, I will take the development. Oh, let's hear you again. No, it fades in.
How about right now?
Now we can. But then it fades out again.
Yeah.
You know, I think we will, if there's no, yeah. Yep. Again, it's just fades in and out.
Maybe put something in the chat for him in case he
Yeah.
can't hear us.
Okay.
I will chat him separately. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. And then if there's no objection from the committee, we'll move on to item 2 and then return to item 1 as soon as the technical issues have been addressed. So no objections. Item 2 is 2020-184, another joint committee's item. It's the 2040 comprehensive plan and comprehensive sewer plan for the city of Norwood, Young America. And Raya Smalley will present to us. Welcome, Ms. Smalley.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. My name is Raya Smiley, and I'm the sector representative for District 4, that's Carver and most of Scott counties in local planning assistance. I was hoping that Stephanie Falkers, the City of Norwood Young America's planning consultant, can be in the audience, but she may be listening in, I'm not sure. Either way, I do want to put it on record and extend my thanks to her. It was really a pleasure working with Steph and getting the plan to this point, and I want to thank her for all of her hard work on this. I hope that she hears it at some point.
Right.
Anyway, before you today is the review of the City of Norwood Young America's 2040 Comprehensive Plan. Next slide, please. Perfect. Thank you. So this map reflects figure 1 of the staff report and identifies the location of regional system components within the City of Norwood Young America. There's the regional trail search corridor, the Twin Cities and Western Carver County. So 2 regional trail search corridors go through the city. And US Highway 212 also goes through the center of the city. The current wastewater treatment services are provided by a treatment plant owned and operated by the city. Next slide, please. Thank you. This is figure 2 from the staff report, and it identifies the city as rural center community designation, and that's consistent with Thrive MSP 2040 as it was in the plan. The city is located in southwestern Carver County and is fully surrounded by Young America Township. Next slide, please. Thank you. This is table 1 that's also in your staff report. It shows that between 2020 and 2040, the council forecasts that the city will grow by 4,620 people, representing 2,000 households, and there will be an increase of 500 jobs in the city in the same time frame. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is table 2 from the staff report that shows the planned residential density within the city. The overall density for guided residential land, as shown in this table, is expected to be between 3 and 9.09 units per acre. Rural center communities are expected under Thrive to plan for forecasted population and household growth at overall average minimum densities of 3 to 5 units per acre for new development and redevelopment. And as shown here, this plan is consistent with this policy. Next slide, please. Thank you. This is the city's existing land use map. That's the figure 3 of the staff report. The existing land uses in the city are predominantly agricultural, with almost 18% of the current land as residential. And the majority of the commercial, industrial, and public uses are located along Highway 212 and along the nearby railroad. And about 9% of the city is parks and open space. Next slide, please. Thank you. This is the city's future land use map. That's the figure 4 of the staff report. The city has an orderly annexation agreement, or an OAA, in place with Young America Township. And that is shown with the pink outline around the city, beyond the gray outline that is the current boundary of the city. The city's future land use plan for areas within the current boundary is very similar to what the existing land uses are, but there are additional residential areas identified just outside of the current boundary within the annexation areas. The plan also indicates about 36 of the overall growth area as planning reserve. Those are the areas that have the green hatch on them. This designation is for areas currently undeveloped, and it's reserved for future development that is mostly post-2040. The growth in these areas is not needed, actually, to support the 2040 forecast. The one last thing that I would like to mention here is that there are several large parcels within the growth areas that are enrolled in the Metropolitan Agricultural Preserves Program. And that designation, like the properties with that designation, are have the planning reserve land use category on them, which serves as both a land use category and an overlay district for these parcels, where there is a known expiration date. If while the property is enrolled, the overlay district will protect the land from development until the property is ready to exit the program. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the proposed findings is that the plan conforms to metropolitan system plans, is consistent with council policies, and is compatible with the plans of adjacent local governmental units and affected jurisdictions. Next slide, please. Thank you. On Tuesday, July 14th, the Environmental Services staff will present this to the Environment Committee, and then this item will be on the Metropolitan Council agenda on July 22nd meeting. Next slide, please. Thank you. So before you, the proposed action is to authorize the City of Norwood Young America to place its 2040 comprehensive plan into effect, and advise the city to provide the council with the date that it adopts the final local water management plan, and with a copy of the final adopted local water management plan that will be included in the final plan document, and implement the advisory comments in the review record for forecasts. With that, I am happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mrs. Smiley, for that report and for your work on this, and thanks for conveying our thanks to the staff that worked on it as well. Any questions on that report? Any questions? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the recommendation from Mrs. Smiley.
Wolf moves
Second by
approval.
Lee.
Thank you. Thank you, council members. Any discussion on the motion? Discussion. Seeing none, Michelle, please call the roll on the motion.
Yes, Chair Lilligren. Atlas Ingebrigtsen,
Aye.
Chambliss,
Aye.
Cummings,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Lindstrom,
Aye.
Lucet,
Aye.
Vento,
Aye.
Wolf,
Aye.
Lilligren.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. That motion is adopted. And we will move on the agenda to, oh my gosh, I have way too many tabs open here. My apologies. Mr. Boylan, are you back on?
I am. Can you hear me okay now?
Yes, we can. Let's return to item 1, 2020-183, the 2040 Comprehensive Plan for Apple Valley. Mr. Boylan.
Fantastic. City of Apple Valley is shown on the screen above, and it is surrounded by the cities of Eagan, Rosemount, Empire Township, Lakeville, and Burnsville off to the west. It is a suburban community designation consistent with Thrive MSP 2040, and Apple Valley is located in the northwestern Dakota County. Next slide, please. Great. This slide reflects figure 1 of the staff report and identifies the location of regional system components within the city. There are 5 meters, 1 lift station. Lebanon Hills and the Minnesota Zoo are prominent features on the northern border of the city. There's North Creek Greenway Regional Trail, Lebanon Hills Lake Marion Regional Trail Search Corridor. Interstate 35E is along the northwestern border, and the Metro Transit Red Line runs down Highway 77 or Cedar Avenue. Next slide, please. This table 1, also in your staff report, shows that between 2020 and 2040, the council forecasts the city will grow by 8,100 people, representing 3,200 households, and there will be an increase of 1,300 jobs in the city of Apple Valley in the same time frame. Next slide, please. Table 2, also in your staff report, shows changes to the city proposed forecast for population, households, and employment as indicated by the underlined figures within the 2020, 2030, and 2040 columns. This reflects the efforts to connect residential and commercial properties to the regional sanitary sewer system and away from existing septic systems. Environmental Services staff was provided with this data from the city and is considered accurate. Next slide, please. Table 3 from the staff report shown here illustrates the planned residential density in the city. The overall density for guided residential land is between 8.22 and 19.86 units per acre. Communities with a suburban designation under Thrive are expected to plan for forecasted population and household growth at average densities of at least 5 units per acre for new development and redevelopment. Apple Valley's plan is consistent with this policy. The Metro Red Line Rapid Bus Rapid Transit Line is aligned along Cedar Avenue, which runs from Lakeville to the south and travels through Apple Valley to the north, all the way to the Mall of America in Bloomington. The Transportation Policy Plan requires suburban communities to achieve a minimum of 10 units per acre for residential land uses and also targets densities of 20 to 40 plus units per acre within a half mile of transitway stations. The plan identifies residential development opportunities for Cedar Avenue corridor near the stations of the Metro Red Line. The city has created a new land use called Suburban Intensive High Density that has a minimum density range of 28 to a maximum of 48 units per acre, which is consistent with the TBP. Next slide, please. As illustrated in figure 3 of the staff report, existing land uses in Apple Valley are dominated by residential of over 48%. Most of the existing commercial, industrial, and office uses are located near transportation corridors, and approximately 3.7% of the city is sand and gravel mining. I don't have the exact figure from 20 years ago, but that 3.7% is far lower than it was in the late 1990s. The city is also home, as I mentioned, to the Minnesota Zoo. Next slide, please. The city's future land use map has shown the city has planned for and is programming local infrastructure needs to implement their plan. The plan uses a regional forecast growth and has average densities that are consistent, as mentioned earlier, with regional land use policy. The plan targets opportunities for intensive development along Cedar Avenue, and several redevelopment areas are adjacent to or close to Cedar, which are served by transportation options and nearby amenities that contribute to a better proximity between jobs and housing. Next slide, please. Rose findings in front of you is that the Apple Valley 2040 plan conforms to Metropolitan System plans, consistent with council policy, and is compatible with the plans of adjacent local governmental units and affected jurisdictions. Next slide, please. Next week, the Environment Committee will entertain this plan on Tuesday the 14th, and the week following, the full council will hear this on Wednesday, the 22nd of July. Next slide, please. The proposed action in your staff report is to authorize the city of Apple Valley to place its 2040 comprehensive plan in effect, to revise the city's sanitary sewer forecast upward, as shown in Table 2 of the review record. And just a note, I just want to also say a personal thank you to Mr. Tom Lovelace. He and I worked on the comp plan 10 years ago for Apple Valley, and we worked together about over a year now working on this one. Really appreciate his professionalism, his patience, and I look forward to working on the 2050 and 2060 plans in the future with him. At this time, available for any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Bolin, for the work on this and the report. Thanks, Mr. Lovelace, as well. And I see you have your plans laid out for you. And also, Patrick, thanks for your persistence in getting the sound taken care of. It's not the greatest sound, but we can hear you. So any questions on that report? Questions? Seeing none, Councilmember Wolf, did you want to move approval?
I would, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember. Is there a second?
Johnson seconds. Johnson seconds. Yep.
Thank you, Councilmembers. Discussion on the motion? Any discussion? Seeing none, Michelle, please call the roll.
Yes, Chair Lilligren. Atlas Ingebrigtsen.
Aye.
Chambliss.
Aye.
Cummings.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Lindstrom.
Aye.
Musse.
Aye.
Vento.
Aye.
Wolf.
Aye.
Lilligren.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. That motion is adopted, and we will move on to our next business item. It's 2020-185. It's the Parks Implementing Agency's Operation and Maintenance Grant Agreement, and Ms. Giesel will present. Welcome.
Hi, Mr. Chair, committee members, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
My name is Heather Giesel. I'm the grants manager for community development and Metropolitan Transportation Services. The Community Development Division requests that the Metropolitan Council authorize the Community Development Director to execute operation and maintenance grant agreements with the 10 regional park implementing agencies. Those are Anoka County, City of Bloomington, Carver County, Dakota County, Minneapolis Parks and Recreation Board, Ramsey County, Scott County, the City of St. Paul, Three Rivers Park District, and Washington County in amounts determined by formula defined in Minnesota Statute 473-351. Funding is provided to the implementing agencies at a 100% state share with no local match requirement. A 3-year grant agreement will document established responsibilities of both the council and the implementing agencies. The agreement will cover the second half of the current biennium and the next full biennium. Annual allocations will be determined by and will be used to support operations and maintenance expenses generally eligible under Minnesota Statute 473.351. A detailed explanation of the O&M allocation and estimated distribution amounts will be presented to MPOSC on July 9th, the Community Development Committee on July 22nd, and the Metropolitan Council on July 24th. This is the first year that grant agreements will be executed for operations and maintenance pass-through funds. Agreements are being initiated now as part of ongoing process improvement efforts. This change has been communicated to the implementing agencies. Per the Minnesota Statute 473.351, the initial payment from the general fund allocation and the first month of lottery in lieu of sales tax must be made to implementing agencies by August 1st. The council will pass through funds to the implementing agencies by August 1st, regardless of whether or not the grant agreements are fully executed in order to meet statutory requirements. At this time, I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Giesel. Any questions on that report? Any questions? Seeing none, I would
Mr.
entertain.
Chair?
Yeah, please.
It's Councilmember Lindstrom. So just
thanks,
to clarify, we've provided O&M funds to the park implementing agencies for a long time. This is just the first time we've had a grant agreement. Is that correct?
Correct. That is something that we're doing for this program and for others as an effort to move towards best practice and having a documented agreement for the transfer of the funds.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Further questions on the report? Further questions? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to approve.
Chambliss, motion to approve.
Second.
Yes.
Okay. Any discussion on the motion? Discussion. Seeing none, Michelle, please call the roll.
Excuse me, Chair Lilligren, I did not hear who's second. I heard Chambliss motioned.
Yeah, and there was quite a few council members. Yeah, so it's broadly supported. So let's see, Councilmember Lindstrom, I think you're one of the seconders, right? Councilmember Lindstrom.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I am going to call roll on this one. Atlas
Please.
Ingebrigtsen,
Aye.
Chambliss,
Aye.
Cummings,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Lindstrom,
Aye.
Musse,
Aye.
Vento,
Aye.
Wolf,
Aye.
Lilligren.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. That motion is adopted, and we'll move on to our final business item for the evening. It's 2020-182. It's July 2020 special budget amendment, and Heather Augustin-Huebner is here to present. Welcome, Heather.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair, Council members. So my name is Heather Augustin-Huebner, and I'm the Finance Director for Community Development. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yes, we are. Thanks, Heather.
Excellent. So as you know by now, budget amendments are a very routine part of our annual budget process, and we come to you approximately quarterly as we need to adjust our operating and capital budgets. On the capital side this afternoon, we propose to bring in new funds to pass through to the regional parks implementing agencies. These funds were approved in the capital improvement plan you adopted last year, and the state fiscal year 21 legacy funds are now available to move to our authorized capital program. New funds include just over $17.6 million of Parks and Trails legacy funds and just under $1.2 million in regional bonds. As referenced in the business item, legacy funds are seeing the impact of COVID, and this amount is lower than the appropriated amount, and we're taking our guidance from MMB on this reduced amount that we are bringing in. Legacy funds for the Metropolitan Regional Park System are distributed to agencies according to a formula set in Minnesota statute. By law, 10% of each appropriation is set aside for land acquisition, and the remaining 90% is distributed by a formula that can be found in your business item. This amendment contains the final allocation amounts by agency represented by the projects titled unallocated funds. Bringing state fiscal 21 legacy formula dollars into our capital budget now as unallocated project demonstrates our commitment to supporting regional partners and meeting their frequent requests to pass funding through as quickly as we are able. All state and council required reviews and controls are maintained. Council staff are now actively working with park agencies to finalize which projects will be funded with state fiscal year 21 legacy dollars. A master list of projects to be funded with both the state fiscal year 20 and 21 legacy dollars was developed following statute and council policy. These projects have been reviewed and recommended by MPOSC and approved by the council on October 24th, 2018 through business item 2018-261. You will see final project selection in the administrative amendment section of a future budget amendment. So what that really means is that we're going to bring in the dollars now so that the agencies can have flexibility in adjusting their projects. So some projects may be a little more expensive than they were originally anticipated. Some projects may be a little less expensive than originally anticipated. And then we'll bring back their final amounts for each of those projects, and you'll see those show up as administrative adjustments in future business items. This amendment also brings in state fiscal year 21 operations and maintenance appropriations, bringing the total budget from about 8.4 million to 9.1 million. This appropriations helps cover a share of the cost of parks operating and maintenance every year. This amendment supports the Thrive outcome of stewardship through responsible planning and management of resources for the Community Development Division and Regional Park System. It also addresses livability by providing access to natural resources for healthy exercise. Our proposed action is that you authorize the 2020 unified budget as indicated and in accordance with the attached table. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Any questions on that report? Councilmember Chambliss. I'll go to Councilmember Chambliss, then to you, Councilmember Atlas.
Yes, as far as the appropriation, the 90% that's being distributed, have those percentages changed at all, or are they in proportion to what they normally are in terms of the shares?
Chair, Councilmember Chambliss, they are very materially similar to what they have been in previous years. I don't have with me a one-to-one of what the past couple bienniums have looked like, but I'm certainly happy to follow that up. But we don't see really drastic changes from year to year, as everything is dictated by a formula and statute.
Yeah, it's very helpful for me, as I've said before, when we see numbers, to see where they were and where they've come from, even in the detailed area of the reporting.
If I may, Mr. Chair, council members, one of the things that you'll see, and I'm sorry, I'm going to look here to a different side. One of the things that you can always see if it's help, well, I guess what I would ask you is if you have looked at the attachments, attachment 2 and 3, to see if that meets your needs. And if not, I'm certainly happy to have a follow-up conversation with you to get you something that would better suit your needs.
Yeah, it's just a general comment. The detail is the detail as far as the attachments, but in the summaries, it can also be very helpful. Above that, like in the background information section. Or in general, maybe if it's increased a certain amount over the last time or decreased, that can also be very helpful.
Mr. Chair, council members, thank you for that feedback. I'll make a note of that.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Atlas Ingebrigtsen.
Chair, this is one of the things that I'm a little frustrated with is that I've asked that we get these pieces with visual presentation so that we can see that information visually represented instead of just read to us, partially as a part of ensuring that there's transparency for the community and clarity of some of these pieces. And I apologize, there's some noise in my background here I can't control. I don't know why we can't get a presentation around these things, and we just have the document that's presented in the way it is, and I guess I'm wondering why that continues to be the case. I keep getting told we will next time, but it's just not happening.
So, Councilmember, just so I'm clear, so you mean a PowerPoint kind of presentation? Yep.
a visual presentation, yes, that the public can understand and that helps also provide that clarity, I think, and giving some of that information that Councilmember Chambliss is looking for in a way that's clear for people to understand.
Okay, cool. And I see Director Barajas has come on camera, so maybe I'll turn to her for a response. Or
Thank you.
Director Barajas.
Thank you, Chair Lilligren. I just wanted to note that I did receive your request last time and forwarded that, and I hope that you were all able to see my follow-up email after our last meeting indicating that I had forwarded that response or your request to our Deputy Regional Administrator, Mary Bogie. We did have this discussion regarding your request at the group that is the chairs of all of the committees, because these are unified budget amendments that are seen in multiple committees, so wanting to use the same approach. And at that time last year, the committees, committee chairs had decided to kind of keep it as is. So I forwarded that request again, and Mary Bogie will be following up on that. So I just wanted to let you know that we have been doing that, where your request is not going unheard.
Thank you, Director Barajas. And I'll also add, as chair of this committee, I think I have a clear idea of what the request was now, so my apologies for not understanding. And yes, if you're accustomed to looking at things like budget amendments, you can find all the data within the attachments and things, but I really understand what Councilmember Chambliss, Councilmember Essinger is just saying. It's not so much for us, it's for the public to be able to understand it as well. So I will carry your request forward, Council Member.
Oh, please add me to it.
Yeah, great.
Thanks.
Thank you. Further discussion on that report? Further discussion? Seeing none, the proposed action is that we authorize the 2020 Unified Budget Amendment as indicated and in accordance with the attached tables. Is there a motion?
Johnson moves.
Thank you. Second?
Cummings second.
Thank you, council members. Further discussion on that motion? Discussion. Seeing none, Michelle, please call the roll.
Yes, Chair Lilligren. Atlas Ingerbritsen.
I'm abstaining from this.
Okay. Chambliss.
Aye.
Cummings.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Lindstrom.
Aye.
Musse.
Aye.
Vento.
Aye.
Wolf.
Aye.
Lilligren.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. That motion is adopted, and we have dispensed with our business items for tonight. We'll move into the informational items. The first is the 2019 Parks Estimate, and Ms. Vandergrift is here to present. Welcome.
Thank you. Chair, committee members, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much. Good afternoon, and it's great to be here with all of you. My name is Darcy Vandergrift. I'm the principal parks researcher, and I will be sharing with you the estimate and a little bit of information about the 2019 Regional Park System Annual Aid Use Estimate. If we could advance to the next slide. So the use estimate background has been produced annually since 1995, and it is used in formulas to calculate each implementing agency's share of the Regional Park System grant program dollars. It also allows for us to monitor trends over time to look at visitation from year to year, and it's a statutory requirement that we complete the use estimate whenever feasible. We will be talking about COVID here in a moment, but it is required that the most recent use estimate be used in calculating our budget. And it's one of two ongoing research responsibilities that the parks researcher has in collaboration with my colleagues. The other is the visitor study which is undertaken approximately every 5 years. And just to quickly differentiate, the annual use estimate is estimating visitation through a process that I'm going to talk to you about. And the visitor study talks to actual visitors to set some formulas that are used in calculating the use estimate, and also to talk to visitors about their experience within our parks and trails. But today we're going to be focusing on the annual use estimate, visitation. So if we could move to the next slide, please. So the 2019 annual use estimate, I first want to give appreciation to my colleagues who worked with me to produce this estimate, Associate Data Scientist Liz Roten, my manager, Jill Hudding, and my colleagues Deb Conley and Kristen Rivaturis. This isn't just me working on this alone, but our use estimate is results from data from 113 regional parks, trails, park reserves, and special recreation features. And we're going to talk about use, about visitation today, but I do want to emphasize that it's not the only way to demonstrate the value of the regional park system, but other important ways that our park system adds value is through climate mitigation benefits and public health contributions. There's lots of values in addition to that we add in addition to visitation. If we could go to the next slide, please. So I just want to briefly share with you the effects of COVID-19 on parks research. We made the decision fairly early at the beginning of March that we were going to cancel the 2020 use estimate process that measures visitation. And so the 2019 estimate will be used for 2 years of funding formulas. And then also there was going to be the 2020 visitor study done this summer, and it has been postponed until 2021. And so the 2016 visitor study multipliers will be used for an additional year. Can move to the next slide, please. So what you see here is a visual demonstration of the process in calculating the annual use estimate. I'm very proud to share and to emphasize that this is a true representation of collaborative interagency work. So it begins with a collaboration process starting early in April of 2019, where we updated the entrances to the parks and trail system in collaboration with the agencies. And regional park implementing agencies over the summer conducted over 2,000 counts within regional parks and trails across the metro, and the council was the coordinator for this. The summer counts, so that is what you see on the left. So the council with the raw counts, we schedule randomized times, dates, and entrances, and the counts occur between weekdays at times 2-hour time increments from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And park staff from implementing agencies count all people entering parks and trails at these designated entrance locations. The summer counts are then combined with previous 3 years of count data. And that's in that middle where you see the word expansion. And we can see expansion is a way of talking about multiplying. And so the data are multiplying using 4 years of past count data. And the reason that we use that, we call it a 4-year rolling average. The reason we use that is to take into account how weather or construction or other anomalies might impact count from that one summer. We take 4 years of data and we expand it using additional calculations, looking for all of applying the sample that is taken to account for all the possible days and times and entrances. So expanding that to the whole summer. And we also expand it to take into account the data from the multipliers from the 2016 visitor study. So for every vehicle that's sampled, we apply a multiplier of how many people we estimate to be per vehicle based on the visitor study data. And then we also expand it by taking another multiplier from the 2016 visitor study, the fall and spring visitation and the winter visitation. And though for every summer count that is made by the implementing agency, we then expand that to estimate how much spring, fall, and winter visitation happened. And then finally, after all of this is done, we move to that final square on the right, special events and camping. And we add in data from camping visits and also from special events. And then we do that non-summer use that I told you about. Just make sure that I'm sorry. So yes, so I think that's all the information on that page, and I'm happy to talk about that a little more if needed. But let's go to the results on the next slide. Next slide, please. So here you see a bar line that is showing visitation across time. And you'll see that our results for 2019 is that our annual visitation is estimated at 63,258,000. So you'll see that that's rounded up to 63.3 million in this table. And from 2018 to 2019, you'll see that increase 59.5 million to 63.3 million, that visitation increased 6.3%. An important thing to note, as I mentioned to you, there are multipliers that are created with the visitor study every approximately 5 years or so. And between 2000 and the prior, before 2016, the prior visitor study was done in 2008. And so between 2008 and 2016, the annual use estimates were informed using multipliers from the 2008 visitor study. So you'll see that there was a pretty big jump if you look at the graph between 2016 and 2017. That is when we started using the new multipliers from the 2016 visitor study. So we need to be really careful with direct comparisons between those periods, 2016 to 2017. But you can see that there has been an annual increase in visitation every year, even from 2017 onward, with the same multipliers from the visitor study. So this is a slide. This slide is showing you visitation of the entire regional park system. I'd like us to move to the next slide where we can see visits by agency. So this slide and visits by agency demonstrates the estimated millions of visits for each agency, starting with 23.6 million for Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board, and moving through all of the implementing agencies, with the smallest visitation being Carver County at 790,000 estimated visits. And so just summarizing the data, St. Paul had a 12% decrease in estimated use. Minneapolis Parks and Recreation Board, Ramsey County, and Washington County had over a 10% increase from 2018 estimated usage. And Anoka, Bloomington, Carver, and Scott County, as well as Three Rivers Park District, had growth rates of about 5 to 8%. And Dakota County had a 3% increase, but it's important to remember that Dakota County had a double-digit increase in 2018. And it's also important to remember that even though I just presented all of these percentages, that some of that annual variation occurs every year, that we don't see any of these numbers as far beyond what typically happens. So, okay, if we could look at the next slide, we will talk about the highest visited parks. Here you can see the top 10 regional parks and trails in our regional park system. And you'll see that Mississippi Gorge Regional Park is a combined count from Minneapolis and St. Paul. That park lies in both of those implementing agency districts. And you can see that here's our highest visitation parks and trails. So those are all of the data that I have to share with you this evening from the 2019 use estimate process. But if we can go to the last slide, I can tell you a little bit about parks research underway. Things have really changed for us with COVID this year, but I am working with the collaborators, a consultant, and the implementing agencies on the 2021 visitor study, even though it's a year away. And as I said, this is a survey to ask visitors about their park experience, to set up funding formula multipliers, and to learn more about visitor demographics. And it's also to find out a little more about the accuracy of our location-based data analysis of parks and trails. So if you remember hearing about Streetlight, And I'm very optimistic. I'm hopeful that the 2021 use estimate will happen as normal next year, even though we will not have one this summer. The Youth and Parks data collection is complete. We were about at the step to start reporting back to some youth serving organizations that we collaborated with, and we're working on how to share that data back remotely with them. And we will also be sharing with you all in August and working, sharing to MPOS. And there will be also a written report, an activity and coloring book, which will be, again, shared back with youth and youth serving organizations and available online, and also a toolkit that we developed on community engagement with youth. And then finally, I am working with other colleagues in research and community development research to move forward with mapping carbon sequestration on regional park land. And just as a reminder, I, the parks researcher, and my colleagues who are working on a lot of this, I collaborate closely with the parks team, but I am based in Community Development Division's research unit. And if we can advance to the final slide, that's all I have for you this evening. Thank you so much for your attention. And I would be pleased to hear any questions or discussion.
Thank you, Ms. Sanders. Any questions on that report? Councilmember Chambers.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation.
You know, can I just pause you for a second, Deriva? Darcy, can I ask you to mute while someone else is talking? You have just a really live reverb. Thank you.
Wow, that's terrible. Okay, yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Chambers, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm just really curious about the engagement and the agencies on page 7. For example, there's the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board, which kind of stands out from, you know, the county information, as well as St. Paul, and how that links to the parks, which in the next slide, you did explain that Mississippi Gorge includes Minneapolis and St. Paul. So is Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board, you know, the agency that represents the Mississippi Gorge? And then I'm sure there may be other agencies as well as what's in St. Paul. And then secondly, in terms of the data collection, youth and parks, I'm just really curious about, you know, what the breakdown is in that. If you've provided it already, I apologize, but it's something that, you know, you always want to keep an eye on to see how well we're doing with diversity. And I love the photo of the Organization of Librarians in Minnesota Youth photo at Elm Creek Regional Park, which is very near me, and the librarian population being quite large, as well as other ethnicities, highlighting that diversity is really important. And a picture says 1,000 words.
Ms. Vandergrift.
Council member, thank you so much for your questions. If you'll indulge me, I'm going to start with the youth and parks question, and then I'll move back to the agency question. I really appreciate your question about kind of disaggregating and talking about who were the youth who were participating in the research process. And there is a larger presentation that will actually be, I am the guide for that research, but there will be 2 young adult interns presenting next in August to you about the research. So there were 85 high school students and also 4 young adult research assistants participating with me in the project. The 85 youth were from 5 organizations, 4 of which were constituent-led organizations. So that was Outdoor Latino Minnesota, Organization of Librarians in Minnesota, Celestial Paladins, which is a Hmong dance troupe with Asian media access. Before we go on the spot, and Troop 100, which was a Greater Twin Cities Hmong Boy Scout Troop, and the final organization was Urban Roots. We also had a short session that we did with Three Rivers Park District Youth Council. And so the representation, I don't have the statistic right in front of me, but was over 80% youth of color and constituent-led organizations. And the demographics of the research team that I worked with was similar. But we'll be talking a lot more about that, and I'm happy to answer any more questions, but we're really excited and proud to come and talk to you about that a little bit more. But let's go back to the use estimate question. I don't know if Greg, if we're able to, or Michelle, if we're able to advance the slides to go back to that visits by agency slide.
It's slide 7.
Slide 7. It says visits by agency at the top. So, and Councilperson Chambliss, please let me know if I don't answer your question to what you were hoping to hear. So we have 10 implementing agencies in the regional park system. And as you know, some of these implementing agencies also have parks within their agency that are not part of the regional park system. So for example, I live in St. Paul. I live down the street from Burns Park. It's a neighborhood park. And so this estimation here is only looking at the regional parks within each one of these agencies. And it is an interesting, as you note, implementing agencies are a diverse assortment of government entities. The kind of almost nationally unique, the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board, and is joined by the city of St. Paul, being cities that are implementing agencies. Greater Hennepin County is represented by Three Rivers Park District. And then the other implementing agencies are all, City of Bloomington is also a city that's representing as a park agency. Again, they have one park and one trail in the regional park system. Their other parks are part of the city of Bloomington, but are smaller and not regional parks and trails. And then we have counties that are also implementing agencies. And I think it's important to two really important pieces I emphasize is that, first of all, visitation numbers is not the only value that a park or trail has. We have some amazing gems in our system that are not the highest visited. And then the other thing that is important to note is that the agencies that have the most visits are the agencies that are the closest to the large concentrations of the population in the Greater Twin Cities, which would explain sort of how you see why the numbers look so different between Minneapolis Park Recreation Board and some of the other agencies. I don't know. Did that answer your question? Could I follow up anything at all?
Oh, yeah. Thank you. That was brilliant. Really. You said that Three Rivers Park District consists of or includes Greater Minneapolis St. Paul? Did you say that? Did I hear that right?
Councilmember, no, ma'am. Three Rivers Park District is Greater Hennepin County. So it's Hennepin County taking out Minneapolis.
Okay. And then you said August the interns would give us a visit and presentation?
Councilmember, correct. August 3rd.
Okay, one more question. Urban Roots is one of the constituency-led groups that you engaged. Where is that located?
So it is, if I can just, council member, if I could do a tiny clarification, Urban Roots was one of the organizations we engaged. When I used the phrase constituent-led, and I appreciate you pointing out to me that I didn't define that, constituent-led means that it is run and led by the community who is being served by the organization. So Urban Roots is an amazing, outstanding organization located in St. Paul. It's not constituent-led in that it serves a diverse population of youth, but it is not necessarily run by the communities where the youth are from, but the other 4 organizations do meet that criteria. They're located over here with me on the east side of St. Paul.
Okay. Did you seek Vietnamese or African American constituent groups?
Thank you for that question, Commissioner. We did seek them. We had a very low entry barrier kind of declaration of interest from organizations, and we chose, and actually I didn't choose, it was a committee of members, community members, youth members, and other council staff that chose the youth participating organizations, and we did not have applications from constituent-led organizations that were either African American or Vietnamese. And although there were African American and Vietnamese youth who participated in the process through Urban Roots.
Yeah, and the reason why I'm asking, because I see a consistent pattern and challenge in getting interest across the board. It almost leads me to think that we need to have maybe a forum or a discussion at some point. And this is not necessarily, directed at you personally, Darcy, but just in general from a council standpoint, to give it some more focus so we can help with the engagement.
Councilmember,
the community or constituents can help.
Agreed. Yes, I completely agree with you. Thank you.
Yep, thank you so much.
Thank you. Further questions or discussion on the report? Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a great report. Really appreciate it. I just want to second what Councilmember Chambliss says. For all of you that share committee work with me, I keep saying this over and over. And again, not necessarily specifically just for that committee, but and Councilmember Barber knows this too, but even in transit and policy making, I'm like, how can we help broaden engagement? I feel that this is definitely part of our efforts to be inclusive and look at systematic racism and make sure we've got the voices around the table. So I'm just seconding that because it seems to be coming up in every committee, and I'd just like to know how the council broadly will make sure that in every line of work we do, with every committee, with every department, we're trying to figure out that engagement and how the council members themselves can help, and then bridge to other community leaders who can, again, bring people into the work in whatever way is needed.
Well said, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember. Further discussion on the report? Councilmember Cummings, and then Councilmember Lee, do you want to be in queue to speak?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, so Councilmember Cummings and Councilmember Lee, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm wondering, Darcy, if you might speak a little bit more about what mapping carbon sequestration on regional parkland means.
Councilmember and Chair, thank you. I appreciate that question. So this is a project that's in some very early stages, but Mauricio Leon, who is working on our mapping greenhouse gases project, recently completed, working with a group of student data scientists, completed a map of carbon sequestration in all land use across the greater Twin Cities. And so there's a formula that has been developed that certain kinds of land result in certain proportions of certain amounts of carbon sequestration. And I have asked him to work on applying taking the map, the layer of the regional park system. So that's called a map. One map is called a layer, layering it over the work that he's already done in order to, instead of just calculating that value for the entire greater Twin Cities, to calculate that value for our regional park system.
Follow up.
Yep.
So how will you practically use that information?
We will be able to use it when we're talking about systems additions, to talk about what is the value that is added when land is added to our system. And it will also be of use to our implementing agencies to be able to communicate with their public about the value of parks. It's a pretty, the reason I think it's worth it is because it's a relatively low level of effort. The work has already mostly been done. So it's just sort of a final tweaking of that. It could also, Mauricio has some other, I don't want to speak out of turn since it's predominantly his project, but he has some other ideas of ways that cities and counties could be able to use that in their planning processes too, with the greenhouse gases dashboard that he's working on.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I want to say thanks to Councilmember Chambliss for her great questions, and I have a personal connection to Urban Roots. They changed their name a couple years ago to Urban Roots, but they were formerly called the Community Design Center, and they do great work out out here in St. Paul, and they have a lot of diverse youth that come through the program as interns, and they do. I can't speak highly enough of them, and I think if you Google them, you'll be impressed with all the things that they do. They help students get work and life experience, and also teach the values of and importance of conservation. So they're a really cool group. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Further discussion, Councilmember Atlas Singer-Britton.
Thank you, Chair. Couple of things. One, the carbon sequestration is something I've also been talking with staff about, as I've been noticing over the time we've reviewed comp plans. Trend, if you look at the maps of green space, either intentional or unintentional green space, before and after, so the current plan and then the plan that's being proposed, I started noticing a trend that green space was significantly going down. And also we weren't measuring it in the same way. So in the previous comp plans, we would measure things like wetlands or unintended naturally occurring green spaces. And then the maps that we were seeing in our comp plans we were reviewing, we weren't seeing that same level of detail or information. And so one of the things that carbon sequestration mapping can allow us to do is to see if we are actually planning ourselves into a worse environmental construct than we are right now by developing over significant swaths of even unintentional green space. That green space captures carbon. And so it's one of the ways that we can create some metrics and measures through our comp planning process to monitor for those kinds of decisions and on a regional basis, where one city might think, oh, it's not a big deal if we remove this. We finally developed that one green area we haven't developed in our community. But if every single one of our communities is doing that, you can imagine what can occur. And if we're not monitoring and in the same way regionally, how quickly that could become a mess. This is why we have the issues we have right now with mass extinction and global warming. It's development. So if we're not measuring it, we can't tell what we're doing. So that's just, I thought I would add that little piece of the conversations I've been having with staff, and really appreciate it coming up today. And I know we'll hear more about it in the near future. The other thing I'd like to say is just to echo Councilmember Chambliss. One of the things that I really hope that all staff feel empowered to do is, if we are making decisions about including communities or engaging people or measuring things, and we're not getting a representative group to pause, to stop, ask for help, and know that we support and value making sure we're inclusive over a timeline, and that we can aid as council members. Our networks are broad and vast, and we should be leveraged to support in that. And so for me, I just really want that to be clear, that our American Indian and our African American communities are often left not even on the table. And it's just not acceptable. And so it doesn't mean you have to be alone in this, but it does mean that you have to come to the conclusion it's not acceptable, and that you need to ask for help, and your desire to ask for help, and you're supported in asking. That if you don't get help from me, you can hold me accountable. Call me out if I don't help you in that.
Thank you, Councilmember. Director Barajas, I see you on camera. Do you have something to add?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to thank you all for your comments on that and your support for engaging with you and seeking your help and engaging with constituents and community members. That's really heartening for us to know. And then related to the comment that Councilmember Atlas Ingebrigtsen made about tracking changes in land use, that certainly is something that we will be bringing forward to as we complete comprehensive planning. And regrettably, we can't show you all of the maps and the work that goes into all of those plans, but there are some communities who have done some excellent work in their natural resources mapping that really work together with their land use guiding. So what we're only showing you is future land use mapping, which doesn't always call out or overlay the wetlands and the areas that they expect for protection and some of those other things. But that's some additional work that we'll be bringing forward to, or I should say additional analysis that we'll be bringing forward to you on changes we've seen since the last round of comprehensive planning, big picture, as well as some of these deeper dives into specific topic areas. Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions or discussions on the report? Seeing none, thank you very much, Ms. Vandergrift, for your report, for your work on this. And as you can tell, this is a topic that this council or this committee is very interested in. So look forward to the future presentations.
Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, we will move on to our final information item. It's the 2021 operating budget development. And once again, it's Ms. Augustine Hübner who will present. Welcome, Heather.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, committee members. I don't know how you're feeling. I always like the first budget conversation. I like to kind of get out what we've been thinking about, what we've been talking about, and get some more direction. And that is really what tonight is all about. It's to get you just kind of oriented into where we are now and to make sure that we hear your voices in what you want us to bring next. So could you go to the next slide, please? Okay, so as I said, we're really just here to start the conversation today. The first thing I want to acknowledge is that in a normal year, I would have been with you and engaging with you before this. Mary Bogie, I'm not going to say anything in addition to what she talked about when you were with the full council, but our budget timelines was impacted by COVID-19 this year. There's been a lot of flux, a lot of things we were trying to just get a handle on what they meant to the 2020 budget and to the 21 budget. So what I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to walk you through a really brief overview of our 2020 budget and kind of give you an idea of what is COVID-19 done to our budget in 2020 and what are we thinking about in 2021. I'll also give you an update on where we are at with federal CARES funding. And I'll walk you through the 21 budget development timeline and really end the conversation with hearing from you. Here, I'll just lay out, here's what we'd like to talk with you about. What else would you like us to talk with you about, both in kind of some of the official budget presentations and in conversations throughout the year. Next slide, please. So this calendar really lays out the major conversations we're scheduled to have with CDC and the council through about the first quarter of 2021. Committees will also continue to see budget amendments on a roughly quarterly basis. The takeaway I'd like from you to have from this schedule is that while we do have an annual budget to adopt, the decisions that drive and impact our annual budgets are really made throughout the course of a year. In particular, such a large portion of the CDC, of the community development budget, is staff time. So really that annual adoption of the work plan really drives what a lot of our budget investments look like. Next slide, please. So this is a slide you have all seen before, but it's really just a good reminder of our division's major responsibilities. That includes providing coordinated planning and policy to help guide the growth and development of the region, to help plan and fund the regional park system, to provide technical assistance to local government to implement regional policies in their plan, to facilitate community collaboration, deliver rent assistance and provide affordable housing for low-income individuals, provide livable communities grants to help clean up polluted sites, expand housing choice, and build developments that connect housing, jobs, and services, and to identify, analyze, and report on issues of regional significance and importance. Next slide, please. So at the highest level, our budget objectives are pretty straightforward. You know, we are designed to support Thrive MSP 2040. We are designed to implement the Housing and Regional Parks Policy Plan. And in the midst of all of the, you know, we want to look at all of Thrive MSP's goals and objectives, and financial stewardship for the budget in particular is one where we're really looking to construct a balanced budget, to identify where there may be structural issues and to figure out how to mitigate and address those over time, and to make sure that we're using good financial stewardship and really making sure that we have that we're maintaining our reserve balances to make sure that if we have storms to weather, we can go ahead and weather those. Next slide, please. So this is another simple graph that you saw last year, and it really kind of highlights what I was talking about a couple slides back, is that our budget is really built from a base that includes meeting federal and state requirements and implementing past council actions. Those could include things like negotiating labor contracts, housing voucher limits, pass-through programs. And again, the council budget is one area where you are still inheriting decisions that past councils make. And you have inherited will inherit in the 21 budget decisions you made in 2020. And at some point in the future, a future council is going to inherit those decisions that you make. Next slide, please. So this is just a really quick snapshot of what our 2020 adopted budget looks like when we apply the council decisions that we just talked about. I do want to make one note. This is the original adopted budget. There have been some budget amendments throughout there. So if you notice some slight number changes, that is what would have caused those. But our annual budget is the operating and pass-through budget. It's just north of $117 million. And as you can tell, over 3/4 of our expense is to fund our HRA program. And that's largely represented in that blue pass-through category. Our remaining budget is used to fund Parks and Livable Communities pass-through programs and our local planning assistance, policy and research, and division management work units. On the revenue side, our federal revenue is really used to fund our housing programs in the HRA. The green bar, the property tax, that goes for the Livable Community Pass-Through Program. And I know you've just had a really robust conversation about the fund distribution plan and the scoring criteria that go along with that. And that's where you influence that piece of the pie. We have council operations, and that's really things like the staff. And we also have Parks Debt Service. Our state funding goes primarily for the regional parks operations and maintenance pass-through, and the remaining about 2.1 goes to housing programs, and that's bridges and Minnesota housing grants. Next slide, please. So I'll be back to you on July 20th to talk more about the operating budget. I'll be back before you in August to talk through about the capital budget. So I just wanted to give you a quick snapshot. So at the highest level, our parks program is about $390 million. That includes both authorized and future plan projects. So when you adopt the annual budget, that includes adopted and planned projects, and as funding is secured, we move the money from the plan side of the budget to the authorized part of the budget through the budget amendments. We pass through 100% of these funds. We know that about $315 million goes to implementing agencies based upon funding formulas. That's going to be legacy dollars, bonding dollars. And we also know that about $40 million goes to implementing agencies through our specific land acquisition program. So we have called those out specifically. And the remaining $34 million represents the equity grant program, which you direct through the fund distribution plan and the scoring criteria. And then the rest of it is direct appropriations and earmarks. And with those dollar amounts, we really do what the legislature tells us to do. And there's not a whole lot of discretion with that bucket of funds. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is where you're going to start to see some slides where there's some new information rather than just a recap. So if you remember, we had a handful of very specific budget initiatives that we were working on in 2020. Some of these we had embedded in the community development operating budget, and some of them you specifically directed some additional general purposes levy dollars for very specific projects. So this slide is a combination of those things. So some of these projects have been impacted by COVID-19 and some haven't. So if we take a look at the local housing incentives accounts, that program really hasn't had any material impacts and is moving forward. Our climate work is moving forward, but maybe not quite as fast as we originally anticipated. Darcy gave a real great lead in with the Parks Visitor Study. That was originally planned for the 2020 budget and is included in the 20 budget, but that is going to get pushed off to 2021. The homelessness and housing area has really had a number of impacts. Some really challenging and some have been a little bit of bright spots in these challenging times. So HRA staff have had some really, really challenging workloads right now as they are processing hundreds of income change requests. So anytime our families do have income change requests, there's a very formal process. And the workload to get that done has really put a great deal of pressure on our staff. So on the positive side, we are meeting federal requirements and providing quality customer service. On the downside, that really cuts down the amount of staff time we have to do other project work. And one of the places that you're going to see that most is we had $500,000 set aside for some very specific capital projects in the 150 council-owned housing units. So that work is still going to continue, but it is going at a much slower rate than we had originally predicted pre-COVID. There's also been a considerable amount of time invested in supporting, managing, and then evacuating the encampment on Hiawatha. So that's going to be another place where just some staff time that we had envisioned to be devoted to one set of projects really had to get transitioned pretty quickly to some other higher and emerging priorities. So we've been really dealing in a challenging time. Some of the good news is we've gotten from the federal government. The first is that we've been awarded 46 more mainstream vouchers to help really get some folks into housing. We got that through the Federal CARES Act money. We've also got another $1 million in additional administrative funds, which is really good. We had costs to get staff working remotely and to keep them working. So we'll bring some more details back to you on this, but it's really, there's a handful of things we can use it for. One is we can use it for just regular staffing costs. You know, if we needed to get additional licenses so somebody could continue to work remotely and serve our clients, that there was that. Gave us some more flexibility in working with landlords, gave us some more flexibility to really get people housed. And again, we'll be back on July 20th with some more details of that. We also know that there is the Federal CARES Act money also had, so the administrative money, we know what we're getting. We brought that into our authorized budget. And we also know that there is another pot in that Federal CARES Act for voucher money. And I'll talk about that here in just a slide or two. So could we go to the next slide, please? Okay, so the federal grant program, the Parks grant programs are one area that we're going to really see you impact the budget throughout the year. So this is another one of these areas where our budget isn't a one-time in May, June, or July where we make decisions. It's really a rolling, it's a rolling project, and we have a handful of different grant programs that are guided by state formula. You know, we really just we apply what the state tells us to apply. Parks acquisition, those grants are first come, first served. Those come before you. The equity grant program, that is our program where we have the most, I would say, unilateral control. And that is a place where we will come to you and to help set the parameters, how much, what volume of funds are we able to put out there? What does the scoring criteria look like? And that's where council members are really able to frame up that part of the budget really directly. Next slide, please. Very similar to that, we've got the Livable Communities grant programs. So while you won't necessarily see this as an active, detailed part of our 21 budget conversation, what you will see is, setting some high level dollar amounts, and then through the annual fund distribution plan and scoring criteria, council members really directly impact the budget in those places. The grants are all competitively awarded. Right now, we've got about 180 active grants that are valued about $85 million, and over 24 million, as I'm sure most of you are well aware, is going to be awarded in 2020. And on the average year, there's somewhere between 20 and $25 million that we're able to get into the community's hands. Next slide, please. Okay, so Metro HRA, we've had some really detailed conversations on the Metro HRA, I think is probably one of the first budget items that we really gave you some concentrated briefings on, and it's likely to continue that way every single year. We are still facing the same challenges the HRA program has historically had. We have rising housing costs, the federal money isn't keeping up, we can't put our own money in, so we are really, really boxed in. COVID-19 is having a pretty meaningful impact on our budget. So if you look at the chart on the graph, Terry and I are going to be back again July 20th to talk more, but I wanted to give you a little bit of a snapshot of what we are working through. So right now, COVID is making the HRA housing budget and our ability to serve families even more acute because families are losing jobs. When they lose jobs, they make less and we pay more. So that's really what you're seeing on this chart. You are seeing a really kind of quick uptick in the average housing payments, and all of that's coming out of our budget. So again, we're just squeezing that we have a pretty finite budget, and we have to figure out how far we can make that reach. And when we're having to pay more and more for each family because they are unable to come to the table with the dollar amount they could when they were employed, that puts a lot of pressure on our budget. We have been very anxiously awaiting news about how HUD is going to release some of this money for vouchers. And we just found out there's a webinar on Thursday. So I can't tell you a lot about that tonight other than we are really tracking it closely. We're going to be really involved to find out what's eligible, what do we need to do to access the money, and we'll be back before you when we know more. Next slide, please. Okay, so that ends the 2020 recap, kind of reorientation to the budget. So let's really start transitioning the stage for our 21 budget conversation. So we do have a tentative plan laid out for July 20th. So I just want to lay that out as a starting point, but then really I want to open the floor for your direction about topics that you want to hear about, content that you'd like to see. And we will either fit that in on July 20th and or subsequent budget conversations. So kind of at the highest level, we want to lay out the budget somewhat similarly to last year. And that means there's just some really standard things that you're going to see when you're sitting in council presentations. So I want to make sure you see a very similar version of that in CDC. So you've got something to really tie it to. So that's going to be laying out our key assumptions, sharing details of what the preliminary expense and revenue sides of the budget look like. And it'll be sources, uses, how we're going to use it, what programs it goes to, and making sure that we describe how the budget is connecting to Thrive MSP 2040, call out any new initiatives. We also have, at minimum, 2 items that we want to make sure that we spend some concentrated time with you on. And I want to walk through what those might quickly look like, and then I'll open the floor back up. Could I have the next slide, please? So the first is parks interest earnings. So I know that CDC has had a number of conversations already about parks interest earnings, and we want to make sure that we're bringing that back up in the context of the budget conversation. So we'll just do a real quick orientation, or what we're proposing to do, talk about the brief history, what the statute says we can do, what it said before, what it can do, where is our flexibility now. give you some more context for like how much is available. And just a quick preview, there's about $1.4 million here to either program we could bring it in through a budget amendment and program it in 2020. We could bring it in the 21 budget. We've actually got a lot of flexibility for where we can bring these funds in. We'll do kind of an overview of the stakeholder feedback we have received to date. That would include council members, MPOSC, parks implementing agencies, and other groups. We'll lay out the options that we have heard and some recommendations, and then obviously anything else you want to make sure that we come to the table with, we'll do that. And could I have the next slide, please? And then, as I alluded to before, we also really want to come back with and talk to you a little bit more about the HRA. We'll come back with more details about what COVID has been doing to our budget, to how it's been impacting the families that we serve, kind of talk about some capacity issues that we have. Hopefully we'll have some good news to share about the Federal CARES Act as we walk you through upcoming decisions and timelines. As you went through last year, what you're going to see in the preliminary budget with HRA is really our best estimates of what we think our revenue is going to be, really based on history. But we really won't know a lot of that till much later in the year. And then a really formative piece of the HRA budget are those rent standards and utility allowance conversations that usually kind of happen in that mid to late fall range. And next slide, please. And with that, I am going to mute myself, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have or take direction you have about how you would like us to come back both on July 20th and for any future conversations.
Thank you, Heather, for that presentation. And I would open up the floor for council members for discussion. Councilmember Chambliss.
I feel like I keep raising my hand today.
I like it.
Thank you for that presentation, Ms. Huebner. I really appreciate the updates and the refreshers. And by golly, I'm starting to understand this more and more. Okay, so I've been getting a lot of questions from community members about, what's going to happen with the COVID impacts due to the pandemic. Are they going to have cuts? What's going to happen to the staff? So people are inquiring, and my answer is, some things that we spend on are guided by state statute, and that money is coming in, on a rolling basis. So it will not necessarily be impacted. Other revenue that comes in is, more discretionary, and some of that discretionary income impacts our equity goals, our livable community goals, and as you were saying, the Metro HRA. So I have been saying that our priorities will stay where they are in terms of what's important for our 2040 plan. And it's very comforting to know that we're getting these updates. I have a question about the impact of COVID in terms of jobs, when you said that a lot of people are requesting more help because they've lost their jobs, so then they qualify for more help. Do you know what types of jobs have been most impacted by COVID? Or is that some information that we might be able to get by the 20th?
Mr. Chair, council members, I don't personally have that. I am certainly happy to explore that, but I also see that that Lisa popped on, so I'll maybe mute myself. Looks like she might have more information.
Okay.
Director
Sure.
Barajas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, council members. We both have information more broadly that research staff had presented around employment impacts in the metro area, and that's on our website. So we can share that link with you afterwards. And I know that Terry can talk to you a little bit more about the detail that we have about the types of jobs that our tenants in particular have, and those who are losing their jobs.
Thanks.
Thank you. And then Councilmember Johnson, were you requesting the floor? Then Councilmember Bento and Councilmember Cummings? Great. So Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One thing, and I guess it's the data. I love to see the data. So whether we have the data, we have such great, robust services and in research and track all that. But again, trying to get specific or as specific numbers as we can in real time is hard, but projecting those out into coming months so that we can see what's really happening to the clients we're serving and how it really then, I believe, shrinks the pool of people, obviously, that we can help. Sorry, dogs. And then I think also, because we have these habitual issues of funding and it's exacerbated by COVID, well, let me back it up too. Could we see data on who is being impacted most by this COVID? I mean, I know for Black, Indigenous, and people of color, they get hit worst. It's people on the front lines making, of course, the lowest amounts of money. But if we could see some of that data also disaggregated so that kind of just trying to better understand how it's impacting our clients and disproportionately so for many. And then I guess my second question is how do we continue then at the congressional level, certainly, and then additionally at the state level, but a lot of this is federal funds. How do we make sure that we communicate that this is, not acceptable? We've been going backwards for a long time, and get this to be a legislative priority. I know it's a priority, but I hear, a lot about how we are in line, certainly with the governor and our state lobbying, but, and I know we've talked with some of our Congress people, but how do we get some movement on this? Those are my two thoughts or questions.
Heather, did you want to respond or just sort of take those back?
Chair, council members, let me take that back. Although I do see, I know that a lot of our HRA staff are really tied into the legislative platform. And Terry, I see, just turned her video on, so I may defer that question to her, if I might.
Sure. Terry.
Hi, good afternoon, Mr. Chair and council members. Councilmember Johnson, that's exactly right. I think the council did recently, maybe a year ago, hired a federal lobbyist in addition to the state lobbying. So Lisa and I have had several conversations with him, excuse me, and we also are active members in the National Association of Housing and Redevelopment officials, which is a housing industry group. So we're continually sending letters to our legislature to support full funding for our programs. And I can start passing them on to committee members when we get requests, to have letters sent to our Congress people, but, lobbying for full funding, the fee formula, and we'll get into some of this when we have our rent limits conversation later in the fall, and maybe a little bit on July 20th, but the fee formula and the funding formula is flawed. So the funding runs a year behind. So we just can't seem to catch up. And when rents are rising, then that exacerbates this. So, but I heard your question about data, and we'll try to bring some data back on July 20th to share the impacts of COVID and what types of jobs people are losing, and, and some of those specifics on July 20th.
Mr. Chair, just one quick follow-up. Thank you, Terry, Ms. Smith. Also, we typically get government relations updates in our weekly reports. Sometimes they don't have updates for us, but is this government relations person that we've hired, the lobbyist, included in that to get updates from him at the him or her, I'm sorry, at the federal level? I just don't know that. And it doesn't have to be a thing now, but I mean, it'd be great to, and maybe I've been missing some things, but just, I want to figure out a way. And thanks for inviting us into sending letters and putting some pressure on too. I'm happy to do my part, and I'm sure everyone else is as well.
And Director Barajas, did you want to add something?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Councilmember Johnson, related to our government relations person who works at the federal level, most of the items that you're going to see will actually filter through one of our division reports. So if it's a transit thing as it relates to federal funding, it will show up there. If it's CD, it will show up in our division report. So I will assure you, you're not missing anything from there, but you'll hear it from one of us directors.
Thank you. Anything else, Councilmember Johnson? Cool. Then I have Councilmember Bento, then Councilmember Cummings. Councilmember Bento.
I have a question that doesn't require an answer tonight, but maybe on July 20th or some subsequent meeting, we could have a conversation about whether or not, you mentioned, Heather, that there's some flexibility as to which year and how this is all timed. And I'm curious as to that timing and how we might leverage increased opportunities to bring some life and some vibrancy in a really dire time. Is there a way of planning this in such a way that it may mean more jobs, more stability, more housing? I know that's a really kind of wide open net as a question, but I'm just thinking about a timing, strategy, leveraging sort of standpoint.
Thank you, Councilmember. Did anyone want to respond or just kind of take that back? Thank you. Councilmember Cummings.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm not looking for an answer tonight either, but it would be helpful. You know, clearly the effects of COVID and the recession and so forth are going to last far beyond 2021. And I know that nobody has a crystal ball to be able to anticipate what's next. But, you know, clearly there's going to be a what's next after 2020 and 2021. So I'm wondering if in your presentation you can kind of talk to us a little bit about how we do think further out about the anticipated needs and things like that. I don't know what the CARES Act money that we are receiving, hopefully receiving, is there, how does that lay out time-wise? Is there a deadline to spend it, or can we sit on this pot and then kind of decide going forward the best way to use it? It's extremely, you know, just even the subsidy rise from December of 19 to May is so alarming and so distressing. And so I'm just wondering how, you know, and clearly I know you're working on this all the time, and thank you for all of the work that all of you do, because it's incredible. But really big picture, kind of how are we looking at this also beyond 2021 and what our options might be? That would be helpful for me.
Chair, committee members, I can absolutely do that. And I can actually give you a partial answer on one small piece of that right now. We know there's, you know, a couple major pots with the Federal CARES Act. One is the administrative funds, and we are being told those absolutely have to be spent by the end of calendar year 2020 or we lose them. I don't think it's too big of a leap to assume that's going to be a similar dynamic on the voucher pieces, but we are definitely having conversations about how to be most strategic with what we have, and your point's really well taken. We'll make sure that's as integrated and as baked as it can be, given the situation is evolving sometimes weekly, but point really well taken. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Lindstrom, did you want to weigh in?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I heard that we received 40 additional vouchers thereabouts through the CARES Act, and I'd like to learn more about that. Are there any strings attached to those vouchers? That seems like that's good news. I know that we could use a lot more, but we'll take what we can get.
Ms. Smith, did you want to respond?
Certainly. Mr. Chair and Councilmember Lindstrom, we got 46 additional mainstream vouchers. So those are required to be used to people experiencing homelessness or at risk of homelessness that are non-elderly, so under 62 years of age and have some form of disability. And they were issued as of COVID. There was no competition, so it was every agency in the country that had mainstream vouchers already, which we do, got a small chunk of vouchers. So we're working in partnership with Hennepin and Ramsey counties to get those distributed as quickly as possible to people experiencing or at risk of homelessness.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments, conversation, discussion about this report? Excuse me, I'm losing my voice. I have been on so many meetings today, I can't tell you, so I apologize. But I have a couple of comments, I guess, that relate to what Councilmember Johnson said, Councilmember comments, Councilmember Vento. I don't need an answer right now, but as we go through the 2021 budget conversation, just a couple of things to kind of lift up. And one would be sort of this overarching idea of regionalization. And we've been actively involved, especially in the areas of unsheltered homelessness and the regionalization conversation, and also in the economic framework. And so at the city, when I served on the city council in Minneapolis, we always said the budget was the biggest policy document we voted on. And so viewing it as a policy document, how can we support this concept of regionalization within something that's, the 2021 budget? And then also to just kind of mark the murder of George Floyd, the civil unrest we've seen since then. Swaths of my district have been destroyed. There's lots of conversation about what rebuilding looks like, what response looks like. I've been invited and have joined the City of Minneapolis Forward Coalition that's helping to advise the city on economic investments post-civil unrest, and just how the ability to sort of rapidly respond to issues like economic reinvestment, and really it relates to the other things as well, the unsheltered homelessness, so that we're building into our most important policy document, our budget, the ability to move as quickly, as adaptably as a huge unit of government can move. And so that's something I would be interested in including in our 2021 budget discussion. Cool. Anyone else? Comments? Questions?
Councilmember Atlas Engelbretson.
Yeah, go for it.
One thing that I would like to be included in the conversation, we've talked a lot about implementing strategic equity frameworks to our work as an organization. Budgeting is a big time when that should be occurring. When people do that, typically what it can look like is that budget line items over a certain percentage deemed to be significant have an additional analysis that's done to identify if people who are overly impacted by inequities are how they are impacted by that line item, and how is the organization shifting decisions to align with equity goals. We've had equity as a part of Thrive, of course, for a number of years now. We've talked about implementing that, and so I think it would also be really helpful to hear on each of those significant items how equity is being framed and looked at in those line items. What are the impacts on communities that are overly represented in our disparities, and then how we think the budget decision that's being suggested or the opportunities that are presented might be able to advance equity.
Great. Thank you, Councilmember. Any further discussion on this? Any further discussion? So thanks, Heather. I think we're going to have a very robust 2021 budget conversation, and
Good, we're doing.
which reflects kind of our uncertain and rapidly changing times. So I appreciate everyone's participation in this and look forward to more. Anything else, Director Barajas? Yeah, thank you. Director Barajas, anything from committee members? Great. Seeing no business before this committee, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Great to see you.